welcome to the first ever, first Brattleboro Pecha Kucha night. I'm very excited about doing this. And the first thing that we have to do is to teach you all how to say Pecha Kucha. Okay? I can say it because I've been practicing. So we're going to do a little video demonstration, courtesy of Sesame Street, and here it is. But we'll need some sound.
Pecha Kucha. Pecha Kucha.
Okay, I'll let you watch the whole thing now. Can we have a bit more volume, Steve? Thank you. You're going to practice this in a minute. Not for me, for the music.
Pecha Kucha. Pecha Kucha.
All right, now we're going to practice. I want you all to sing along. We're going to do it again. This will be the last time, and it'll be burned into your brain.
Pecha Kucha.
Pecha Kucha.
Pecha Kucha.
Okay. Got that? So that's Pecha Kucha. We're and now I should introduce it to you, let you know what it actually is. In 2003, in Japan, a design company decided they wanted to figure out how to get their design students to talk about their projects that they were doing without spending 2 or 3 hours doing it. So they came up with this kind of haiku for presentations. 20 slides, each shown for exactly 20 seconds. So the whole presentation is just 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And it forces people to be concise. It forces people to think about what they really want to say. And it's turned out to be such an entertaining format. As you've seen, it's spread all over the world. It's in 364 cities right now. Most of those cities run them several times a year. And they're just a really fun way of meeting interesting people who are in your town, who are doing interesting things, and thinking about how they're going to talk about them in 6 minutes and 40 seconds and get something across. And you're going to see 10 examples of that this evening. We've got 10 people who have courageously volunteered to do this. None of them have ever done it before. I myself only did one of these things a few months ago at a conference in Minneapolis, and I was amazed at how successful it is, and I hope you'll have the same experience.
Yeah.
Only 2 things I'm going to say before we get started. The first is no questions during the presentations. We're going to have a break halfway through. We're going to have 5, then a break, about a 20-minute break. A beer break, it's called, and there'll be more hors d'oeuvres out there as well. I want to emphasize that Tristan has opened the Riverview Cafe for us this evening. It's normally closed. The hors d'oeuvres are free, and I have a little donation box. I discovered after I started advertising that we can actually charge a door charge, but we haven't done it this time. And so I have a box, and if you'd like to put in a couple of bucks towards the hors d'oeuvres and having the space, that would be great for him, completely voluntary. The other thing I want to say is that remember that none of the presenters have ever done this before, so please excuse their first attempts, which will probably be pretty good, and applaud their bravery and their presentations after each presentation. There's a couple of sort of intermediate slides that are in between each presentation to allow people to get ready. So am I speaking to 2 microphones at once here? Probably. we should lean it up against the stand. You don't want to do that. All right. There's always duct tape. So I'm just going to let the presentation speak for itself. We have everything's in one whole long presentation, and there'll basically be a title slide. The presenters will come up. There's a hand mic. Any presenters I haven't spoken to, there's a hand mic here. You can either use it in the stand. I've got a separate mic here, or you can pick it up and carry it around with you and pass it back and forth. If there's more than one of you, which in some of these cases there is. So I'm going to just turn the floor over to our first presenters, okay, then I will move through these slides, and this is working. Here we go. Yeah, we have to put this copyright stuff in here. But it's all volunteer. The whole thing is volunteer. There's a sort of I've signed a sort of handshake agreement for Brattleboro, and that's how it all works. And horizontal arts is the first. This is our title slide, and when I press go, it's going to be that. So you tell me when you're ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Go.
Okay. Oh, there's no noise coming out of this.
There's a switch on the bottom.
I'm going to start this again. This isn't fair.
No.
Hold on a second. I can do this. The next time we do this, it'll be very smooth.
You going to count us into the title slide? Or we
No, I'm going to start you again. Okay, so hold on. Tell me when you're ready.
Changing the battery.
Oh, no. Is that mine?
Mine.
Where did my drink go?
I think it's on the table.
It's on the other table.
Over there.
It's up front.
What's up?
We're waiting for our microphones to be made to work.
You might have to share your fancy little neck one.
Well, I can do that.
Technology.
We actually organized this to raise the tension. It's an old trick.
Okay.
Rehearsal.
No, we want it because we need it.
Thank you.
Tell me when you're ready.
We're ready. Okay, I'm Gary Jones. This is Horizontal Arts that we're presenting. It's a project to put art into the sidewalks of Brattleboro. And we'll explain as we go along the various things that take up this project.
This is the kind of pioneering element. This is by Ken Hiratsuka. It has nothing to do with something called, well, the previous slide, nothing to do with the Town Arts Committee. And that happened in, that happened in 2007, and that was an installation outside Boomerang. It was sponsored by Boomerang. That inspired us to take further steps. Us means the Town Arts Committee. And what you just saw was the Fulcrum Arts phase one of what we officially call horizontal arts, done by Fulcrum Arts. That's Natalie and Randy Solon and Natalie Blake, and they put that in late June and early July of 2010 this year. And that was the first thing. Now, the final, initial phase was the Brattleboro Union High School. This is Gary.
We just keep going until we run out of sidewalk, which
What happened there?
ain't going to happen. So that's the idea, is to get as much art into the sidewalks around the town as we possibly can.
That was a documentary, a trial documentary that we're putting together to eventually document the whole thing. We've been working, the idea so far It came from a night organised by TAC to use the resources of the town to present, to put art into the sidewalks and generally around town. And so we've been working with the town works department, and that's Steve Barrett there, and wonderfully collaborating with us. So we work with him, and he tells us what's the next piece that we need to work on.
And the name of the game is collaboration. So the Town Arts Committee exists to facilitate collaboration. And that could be between the town of Brattleboro and all its government offices and the public and those who create art. And we're going to give a list of some of the other elements with whom we collaborate.
Well, the artists of the town will be working with artists, visual artists will be working with blacksmiths. This is really tricky. Any way that we can get art into the sidewalk and cover all of the things that we need to cover, safety and such.
We have consultants, at the moment unpaid. They're called Rich Holshoe of Concrete Detail and Glenn Rosinski, who we see there, of Rosinski Masonry, and they help us with the technical aspects of incorporating artwork into functional sidewalks.
As I said earlier, we're documenting this so that we can have an archive of images and ideas, and we'll be working with a local videographer, Bill Fortune, who will be working with us over a period of time to see this unfold.
A major collaborator is, of course, the public. So people are transformed when, because you're looking at a piece of wet cement there, but when kids, adults, people with strollers, couples, single people, whatever, walk up this, very frequently they stop and look, and they are literally transformed in that moment. They pay attention to something they're walking on, and they take a moment out of their lives to address that, and we're very proud of that.
Another way of collaborating is the town attorney has been drawing up a memorandum of understanding for artists who work with us to understand all of the issues as much as possible before they even start the thing. So they read through this memorandum and then sign it at the end.
So what's this all for? This is a non-political way of marking the town, of making the town a place with a geography, just the way you might describe the gazebo, the courthouse, or a significant piece of architecture. So either townsfolk or visitors, they would start saying, well, you get to the farmer's market by visiting the Picasso over there and the Michelangelo and that type of thing. So again, we're very happy with that potential.
As I was saying before, this is part of a bigger project to put public art into Brattleboro. And all of the other infrastructure of the town, the material infrastructure, is up for grabs. The town, a trash can, the town has to buy trash cans. So why not use that money to give to an artist to at least seed an artistic version of it? And coming up is something actually that I've been working on, which is about to go into the town now. So we might have things like this. Anyway, this is just a whimsical version of just to give the idea. And there's park benches, there are bridges, there are all sorts of things in the town that can be artified.
So what are we really doing with all this? As I say, we're marking the town. We're offering public art as potential for people to identify and use the town in very specific and non-political ways. Also, we offer the Department of Public Works savings, because it's artists who end up finishing the concrete, not the labour employed by Public Works. Equally, the artists get promotional opportunities, and the public greatly benefits from having this new relationship, from the utter humility and utilitarian nature of something that you have to walk on and not slip on, that nevertheless contains art.
As a further vision for this, we're hoping to for this to be a template for other communities in the state and perhaps across the country. There are budgets already allocated for these things. On a state level, on a federal level, there's no reason why this can't go out. And there's no reason why Brattleboro can't be spearheading something like this, that we can seed the rest of the state and the rest of the country. To get more public art out there and to get artists working
So we have a vision for the future which helps us think of Brattleboro as an arts destination, as an arts town. And we've received a lot of support from very significant figures. As Gary's pointing out, a template maybe for other towns to use as they consider their public monies. Thank you very much. Pecha Kucha.
Good evening. As well as living in Brattleboro, we have a home in a small ranching village in the mountains of northeastern Mexico. Our intention in living there is to be cultural ambassadors, to share our culture, ourselves, but also let ourselves be changed by the culture that we find there.
Mexican parents, like parents everywhere, love their children. But children in our Mexican village don't live in large houses and have their own bedrooms. They live in close quarters in small houses with their parents. And from a young age, they do meaningful work with adults close by.
Nice picture, huh? Okay. However, play is an activity that children usually do without the involvement of adults. Without many toys, their play is imaginative and creative. We once saw half a dozen children encounter a ladder that had been left on the ground, and the children stepped into it, each one into their own space between the rungs. They lifted it to waist height and paraded around, and laughter filled the air.
We're genuinely delighted to be playful, and therefore we found it easy to develop relationships with our young neighbors.
In a place where most of the houses are made from cement block, sand is a building material and is usually off limits as a material for play. We have made an exception at our place and built a sandbox in our yard. Sometimes there's as many as a half a dozen or to a dozen children playing together in that sand. Any object can become a toy.
This particular cardboard box came in handy for a great practical joke. One of the young girls climbed inside it, and I closed the lid. And I called across the road and asked her dad to come over and help me lift this heavy carton. So he came over, and together we lifted it. And his daughter popped out. He was genuinely startled, but also a little incredulous about these gringos who spend so much time playing with children.
One game that most Mexican families do play together is loteria, often doing betting with real pesos. It's sort of like bingo, but done with pictures, and it's been a great way for us to learn some rapid-fire Spanish and lose a little bit of money.
With the resources at our disposal, it's easy for us to stock our house with more than one game. We have a number of board games, jigsaw puzzles, children's books. These are rare treasures in our village, and we have frequent visitors in our home.
Even pencil and paper are special. This girl, Gabriela, once looked up incredulously at me and asked, "Eres tú una gringa? Are you a gringa?" We obviously didn't fit her stereotype of Americans.
Alex is the boy on your left, and we were the first white people that he ever met. And the first time he saw us, he was so scared of us that he was literally shaking. The adults all urged him forward, saying, "Shake hands, shake hands." And I pulled my own arm back inside my sleeve, and Laurel cried out,
"Oh no, Steve lost his hand."
Alex was slowly drawn into the game, and for many months we called him Mr. No Hands every time he offered us an empty sleeve to shake.
As you can see, Alex did lose his fear of us, and needless to say, he's a good friend now.
We purchased a whiteboard for the wall of our house and began to teach informal English classes for anyone who wanted to come. At one point, we gave a series of classes on the theme of housework, laundry, cleaning, cooking. And in a place where gender roles are so rigid, we expected some of the girls in town to be interested, but as it turned out, several teenage boys were our only takers for that class series.
The final class consisted of preparing, eating, and cleaning up a spaghetti dinner, all in English. It was a lingual, culinary, cultural, and social success.
We also initiated a project for our village's middle school students to plant trees in their schoolyard. This photo shows a couple students who we took with us to a state-run nursery where we went to pick out seedlings.
We spent a day helping friends learn how to make silage with a corn chopper. Our intention is always to work joyfully, but Donnie, he showed us how to enthusiastically jump hard to be able to pack down the silage.
And his enthusiasm led to the willingness of all the adults to climb up on the pile, help pack down the silage, and pose for a group photo.
The first time this mother saw us walk into her village, she had warned her children, "Be careful of those people. We don't know what they want." Since then, we've become very close friends.
Her son, Jesus, also came to know us and to trust us. When he graduated elementary school, he wanted to continue his education, but the middle school is more than an hour's walk from his home. We live close to the school, so he asked if he could live with us during the school year.
So when we're in Mexico, our family includes Jesus. We help him with his homework, he helps us with our Spanish, and when the homework's done, we play card games and do Sudoku puzzles together.
So have we succeeded in becoming cultural ambassadors?
We certainly have become more than tourists, as we've learned to love and live together with our friends and neighbors in Mexico.
We'll be around during the break and at the end of the evening, and we hope, if we don't already know you, that you'll stop and introduce yourselves to us and keep in touch.
Okay?
Our Earth has been evolving for millions of years, and I don't think it needs to be saved.
More volume.
Maybe it's our way of life that needs saving. I want to know the right thing to do, and I want to share some things I've been thinking about, including the history of Vermont agriculture and the use of fossil fuels and electricity. Are humans going to use up all the planet's oil reserves someday? I want to know what to be prepared for, and I want to be happy. Will using less energy cost me money or time? I'm concerned. Also, will I have to give something up? Wait a minute, I use oil to heat my house and hot water. I hadn't thought about how much I use oil for my home. Is our way of life based on achieving happiness driven by greed? A recent study claims that $75,000 a year can buy happiness, and income beyond that won't improve your daily mood. This survey studied two forms of happiness: day-to-day contentment and a satisfaction with your place in the world. Do lenders make money by amassing financial claims on borrowers? And does our economy survive because of spenders? I'm an artist. I don't make a lot of money. And I want to make enough money to make ends meet. Every morning I wake up in a panic thinking, what am I doing? I should have a job. I need money. I wonder what the real cost of that money is and how much of our natural resources and energy would a full-time job consume. Okay, there's two parts to my brain. I'm having a conversation about this with myself. Maybe I have a good or virtuous side and an evil screw-it-all side. But there's a third part to my brain, the limbic region, responsible for emotions, fight, flight, freeze response. Now there are three sides to my brain telling me what I should do. It's too confusing. Transition movement believes life without oil could be more enjoyable. And it could be seen as an opportunity rather than a threat if we use our creativity to design a future that's sustainable and abundant. In Putney, that means lots of gatherings and learning new skills and getting to know my neighbors. Rob Hopkins, founder of Transition, will now show you something amazing.
which is one of the great marvels of the modern age. And there's something so astounding and so astonishing that I think maybe as I remove this cloth, a suitable gasp of amazement might be appropriate. If you could help me with that, would be fantastic. This is a litre of oil.
Within the last 100 years, we've discovered oil and electricity and then based a whole way of life around it. This timeline represents 400 years of agriculture in Putney and Vermont and a history of electricity and fossil fuels. The first commercially available automobile, the Model T Ford, was built 100 years ago. People began using electricity in the 1920s, and it was first in the barn. 100 years ago, Putney had 80 farms with about 12 cows each. Butter was the main dairy product. At that time, farms began producing fluid milk and shipping it to Boston on the train. Farms on better roads modernized and flourished, but farms on small, steep roads declined or shut down. My mom... Let's see what happened here. I think I messed up here. Wow, the automobile and electricity changed how we live dramatically in 100 years. How do people live without it? That's a picture of my mom, the face of one generation. She was born in 1924. The Model T was still being built, and it was also the early days of electricity. She remembers getting her first refrigerator in 1941. Today, she's 86. She would have been 4 years old when this picture was taken in 1929. Horses were still used for farming. Model T Ford and the industries that developed because of it changed how we live dramatically. My dad, William Lazar, is now going to read an excerpt from Farewell, My Lovely, a story written
I
in
see by the new
1936.
Sears Roebuck catalog that it's still possible to buy an axle for a 1909 Model T Ford. But I am not deceived. The great days have faded. The end is in sight. Only one page in the current catalog is devoted to parts and accessories for the Model T. Yet everyone remembers spring times when the Ford gadget section was larger than men's clothing, almost as large as household furnishings. The last Model T was built in 1927, and the car is fading from what scholars call the American scene, which is an understatement, because to a few million people who grew up with it, the old Ford practically was the American scene. Springtime, in the heyday of the Model T, was a delirious season. Owning a car was still a major excitement. Roads were still wonderful and bad. The Fords were obviously conceived in madness. Boys used to veer them off the highway into a level pasture and run wild with them as though they were cutting up with a girl.
That's George Aiken. Springtime for the automobile has come and gone. Tom Wessels, in his book, The Myth of Progress, claims our economy based on inefficient use of resources runs contrary to scientific laws that govern natural systems. Our global economy, based on ever-expanding economic growth and dominated by large corporations, create inefficiencies in material and energy uses that are not sustainable. This summer I joined the Putney Community Garden, a project of Transition Putney. I grew things I would eat or paint. I learned a lot about growing food from other gardeners and local farmers. It was a lot of work. I set myself a challenge to eat all the produce I grew, and it takes a lot more time and effort than going to the grocery store. The 20th century saw the largest legal accumulation of wealth in history, a pattern of wealth now, philanthropy later. Slow Money's mission is to get companies to invest in local communities instead of trying to show huge profits, which would make our communities healthier. Woody Tash wants to develop financial products and services for investing in local food systems. Tom Wessels' research describes how the most energy-efficient species survive. If we're going to thrive beyond peak oil, will we need to find ways to become less dependent on oil? I think we are more influenced by the person to the right or left of us than we'd like to admit. We take our cues from each other. How do we get people to accept less and feel okay about it? The other day my son said, "Dinosaurs must have been so inefficient. They obviously use so much energy." I made him repeat it because it seemed to express exactly what I'm trying to say. Although I guess we have the age of the dinosaurs to thank for all the reserves of oil we're using now. We all have a choice. If we make less money or use fewer resources, it may not make us happy, and it might not be good for business. The Transition Town movement connects community members with ideas about how to gracefully move beyond the way we live now. We all have an opportunity to deeply inspect the ways in which we live our lives, the types of work we do, and how we value that work. during the break, I put up the timeline. It's over there. And my mom actually sent me a letter last week that had a list of all the things, what life was like in 1909. And she actually included a couple of things about what it was like for her life. Well, she wasn't born yet, but what my grandfather would have been like. And I also brought some pesto with me and some crackers that I'll put out over there that came from my garden.
Since this is such a vast, small world, I wanted to give you a personal view. I like the wheel at the bottom. It kind of accentuates the motif. This is my son. He's 6. I wanted to do something with him, and I took up skateboarding in my mid-40s. I actually had a steel-wheeled skateboard as a kid, but it was bone-jarring. One of the cool things is just about anywhere in the world has amazing skate spots. This is Jarry Park in Montreal, and we showed up. Unfortunately, the only people wearing helmets and pads, everyone else didn't even really have clothes on. In the back corner, the locals, these are the Brattleboro locals inside the Boys and Girls Club, assembled for a contest. What they're doing here is receiving the general layout of the rules, which is pretty much everyone gets a run, and they go for a minute or so, and they do the best tricks they can. And helmets are required in that space. Here's another view of the space. The rules are still being given up above, and down below, here I am with my friends. The figure in the foreground is a friend of mine, and it's an expression of something that I saw in a dream, which is to sort of like animate the soul and sort of express another dimension. This is a shot of a group of peers that I skate with called the Geezers of New England. It's really nice to not be 30 years or 40 years older than everyone else that you're skating with. One of the great things about this form is that there's always something to work on. From the very beginning to at any point in mastery of the arc, the learning curve is endless. Here on the left, you see him practicing the ollie, which is how do you get airborne. It's pretty much an extension of the same balance principle we started with. Slamming is an unfortunate but an inevitable part of it. It's actually very instructive and humbling. It's nice for your son to see you laid out. It gives him a sense of perspective. Doesn't look so...
I'm Mary Rothschild, and I had a nonprofit called Healthy Media Choices, which is what should really be up there. I work with the parents and teachers of children 0 to 7 years old. Many of us love our electronics and the tools we use to communicate with each other, to express our creativity. We're doing it tonight. The question is how to prepare young children to be able to use and not be used by these devices in the 21st century. How to prepare them. Best way from our point of view is in this window of opportunity between birth and age 7 to give them developmentally appropriate activities. We focus here because this is where the advertisers are focusing. $15 billion a year are focused on advertising directly to this age group and to their parents, things like Baby Einstein, Brainy Baby, which are not necessary. And the reason they're doing that is because of this, and the reason we focus is because of this. From birth to age 6 is the most active time of neural connection. Neural connection is on a basis of what is fired together, wires together. So the impressions between birth and age 6 are particularly important for the view of life that this child will have and the view of relationships. Sensory interaction, story, loving role models, and free play are the 4 things that are essential to healthy neural development and just being a balanced person in those first 6 years and throughout life. If we look at what children in this country are doing, Brattleboro may be an exception, but on the average, 25 hours a week are spent with the screens, and a half an hour alone with the father, 2.5 hours alone with the mother. This isn't really a great thing because it doesn't say how much time they spend with both of them together, but you get the idea. The storyteller is the screen for the vast majority of children in this country. So what's happening with sensory interaction? What's happening with those role models? What's happening with free play? The kind of free play that Steve and Laurel showed us in Mexico is being lost in this country because of a combination of all of these hours being spent with screens and no child left behind in the schools, so that free play is being diminished. The pediatricians just came out, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and reinforced their statement from 10 years ago that no screens at all under the age of 2, maximum of 2 hours a day of pro-social media after 2 years, no screens in a child's room, and there is no evidence that there's any educational benefit for a child under the age of 3 from screens. So, what is it? We focus in our workshops on the story of the popular culture. You can never have enough stuff, you can never look good enough, you're defined by your gender, you have to fear the other, and violence is the way to solve conflict. These are the themes of pretty much everything that children see, even if it's non-commercial. Baby programming can be thought of as a gateway drug to this, and this is the way I like to think about it, to this kind of story. Because what it's doing is training a child to look at screens, and in the comfort of their own homes. There's no language acquisition. The best way to have language acquisition is to have a loving person speaking to you. How did we get here? In 1984, we became one of 2 countries in the world that completely deregulated children's programming. All of the advertisers can have completely free reign. The only other country that does that is New Zealand. So the year after that, the top 10 toys for children were from media, up from 30% the year before. There had been things like balls and dolls and things like that. And since then, there has been an 852% increase in children's spending on toys and junk. We need, because most of the parents of young children today were brought up in the last 26 years in this environment, we need media literacy as part of parent education. We don't really have parent education at all, but if we did, it would be great to have media literacy as part of it. And this is basically the kind of thing. Like, we look at this. This is SpongeBob SquarePants, something a lot of households have, folks. And we look at this and say, you know, how does this make me feel? Who made it? Why did they make it? How did they make it? How does it make me feel? Is this the story I really want my child to be learning about life? Basic media literacy. The other thing that parents need to understand is that the marketers play on the fact that children get attached to the characters in these programs and use that attachment for commercial ends. This is, a lot of psychiatrists think of this as basically child abuse, to take a child's attachments and use them for commercial ends. And once that habit is formed of attaching, it's very difficult to control. Hannah Montana, supposedly a teenage thing, the average age of the watchers of Hannah Montana is 7 to 8 years old. And once that attachment's formed, Hannah has gone on to pole dance, and so have the toys down here, a pole dancing toy. Now these are a lot of question marks, but because I needed a break. And also because, what are the questions here? The questions are, what kind of citizens will these children be growing up to be? Free play is the way we learn to problem solve. If there's no free play, if they're learning these formulaic ways of playing, what's going to happen? So we focus on, sorry about my PowerPoint is my thing, on a unique microsystem of the household. Extended family and friends, exactly what Laurel and Steve are doing, community, the pediatrician, and we look at who they are and how much stuff we have in our house and how we spend our time. And try to get a focus on what kinds of stories can be shared. We try not to go to guilt, but to go to empowering people to say, who do we have around who are role models? Who do we have around who can tell those affirming stories? How can we take our power? How can we talk to teachers and caregivers and pediatricians about what we see happening with our kids? A lot of people come out of our workshops with many different solutions for their particular unique situation. The media Sabbath is something that is starting to become very popular. Taking a time when everything gets turned off and we just pay attention to being together. Connecting with family stories, using media to tell the family story, working with advocacy groups. And the basic bottom line of all of this is, if your child, if you want them to be their particular unique version of Einstein, the best thing you can do is give them your attention and let them have free reign of their environment and be in touch with nature. That's it. There's a workshop on November 30th at the Marlboro Tech Center for parents and teachers of young kids.
So we've got a 20-minute break right now, traditionally known as the beer break. And feel free to talk to, this is your chance to talk to the presenters. And there'll be some time at the end to talk to the next 5 presenters after we've heard them.
It's terrible.
Palestine, this promised land, to whom is it promised? Home, a place where one's heart and soul resides. My ancestors lived in Egypt. They were enslaved for hundreds of years. Then Moses, according to legend, freed us. We reclaimed a piece of land on the edge of the Great Sea and prospered. We conquered, and in turn conquered others. We rebelled against Roman rule. Thus began the diaspora, exiled from the promised land. For 1900 years, we were scattered around the globe. In Baghdad, Cairo, Fez, Alexandria, we were welcomed. Marhaba, ahlan wa sahlan bik, itfadal, ahlan wa sahlan. No pogroms, no persecution. We thrived and prospered. But in Europe, when a plague came, they called it a Jew's curse. When misfortune happened, it was because of the Jew. The pogroms arrived as sure as the change of seasons. Cossacks, king's soldiers, our neighbors would come, burn our houses. We were forced to move. There is no place for you, Jew. In Berlin, Germany, we were the elite. We were the poor, the doctors, the laborers, German, Jew. They said, if you ever forget you're a Jew, don't worry, someone will remind you. Some of our grandfathers fought in the trenches of World War I for the Kaiser. Nevertheless, veterans with yellow stars on their chest and wearing the Iron Cross for bravery were huddled on the trains. You think you're German? No, Juden. My extended family, unknown aunts, uncles, cousins, all killed. Auschwitz, Dachau, Buchenwald. Our skins made into lamp, our teeth melted down for gold, our bones ground down for fertilizer, and the world was silent. The American government knew, they knew, and turned back shiploads of Jews back to Europe. With every year of silence, with every year of quiet, efficient, methodical genocide. Next year in Jerusalem, we would say every year at Passover to celebrate the bitterness of slavery and the hope that our lives for our children would be better. We said never again as the Star of David flew proudly over Palestine. how could we, with the intimate knowledge of evil, not be just? Absurd. The Torah teaches us the virtues of the just person, the moral person, the righteous one. How could we, who have suffered enormously, not be just? But now in Palestine, when a stone is thrown, the person, the village, exiled, no trial. Farms now, as we see, farms lovingly tended for generation after generation, olive trees rooted in the ground, ripped up, destroyed by Israeli settlers. There is no justice in Palestine. And in the end, we are beyond right and wrong. There is a people called Palestinians, Israeli, Muslim, Jew, two people. And is there room in the Holy Land? Is there room in the Holy Land? Christian, Muslim, Jew. We are yoked together, Cain and Abel, sons of the same mother. We are yoked together. Is there room? Is there room in the Holy Land? When can we celebrate our common deliverance from hatred? Today, as we speak, another child, Israeli, Palestinian, will be killed. Their brothers and sisters will grow to hate each other, but we are one. One family, one tree, Muslim, Christian, Jew. Free Palestine, Palestine, this promised land. To whom is it promised? And when can we celebrate our deliverance from hatred? Maklava, Maklava. I walk through the streets of Jerusalem. I walk through the streets of East Jerusalem. I look in the faces. I see the soldiers stopping there, stopping young men, asking them, why? Why are you walking on the street? But in the Holy Land, Al-Aqsa Mosque, in the Holy Land, flying proudly, free. Shalom, salam, ahlan wa sahlan, ahlan wa sahlan, marhaba, shalom, shalom, ahlan, welcome.
I love the With Interest booklets. With Interest was first and foremost an advertising booklet produced by the Vermont People's National Bank of Brattleboro. It was actually the Vermont National Bank at the time. The first issue stated, the purpose of this magazine is to make bank statements popular for summer reading. It began in July of 1922 and was published at various intervals until April of 1932. 43 issues in total. Each issue is about 4.5 inches by 6 inches or so. You could pick them up at the bank or leave an address and they would mail them to you. You could carry them in a pocket or put them on a coffee table, and many people saved and collected them. Charles E. Crane was the editor and the writer. He liked to write about Brattleboro history, and he had connections to local photographers like Hayes Bigelow, who supplied him with great photos of Brattleboro, such as this 8-page, bold-out panoramic photo of town from the second issue. With Interest featured both current and historic photos. At first, it was all about the bank. Early issues had lessons about reading a bank statement, and bank history that celebrated 100 years of banking, advice on savings or using a safe deposit box or other new bank services were common in many issues, as were photos of vaults. Crane also loved local history. He must have known Mary Cabot, author of the Annals of Brattleboro books, which he often refers to when relating stories from Brattleboro's history, starting with banking history, of course. Ephroditus Seymour, the first bank president. Old images of town were sometimes featured in an issue. And then by May of 1923, it was clear that the booklets were very popular, and they didn't have to always be about the bank for people to keep picking them up. In fact, people seemed to enjoy the history and photos more than the banking lessons, and they sort of dropped away. These photos of Main Street and the Brooks House are from a special 1925 issue of double-page photo spreads. Crane worked with photographers and began documenting Brattleboro in the 20s as in photos and words. Here are Canal Street school students, Brattleboro playground leaders, and James Offord, Wheel Club steward. Note the flasks available in his case. The Wheel Club was on Elliott Street. They took pictures of people. Here are Esther Crowell, assistant librarian at Brooks Library, the 1930 high school band on the steps of what we call the Municipal Center, and kids jumping barrels at Vinton Rink. There are hundreds of people pictured in with interest. They documented places. Here are the new operating rooms at the hospital, the new Union Station, new buildings on Main Street. With interest was celebrating Brattleboro's visible growth and progress. That's a wall now. With interest also highlighted special town events. Here are pictures of town meeting from 1929, an early ski jump competition on Harris Hill. You can see the crowds, and the glamorous ski balls held each year. With interest also covered local news of new Brattleboro developments and bank improvements, of course, but also things like fires. Here are some fires in town: the Princess Theater fire, one on Elliott Street, Bradley fire, and Center Church here down in the middle. These are big events. Special issues with many photos and captions were created to celebrate specific Brattleboro institutions, such as the Retreat. Here we see photos of their modern facilities, plus farm labor and recreational opportunities that they present, some of the scientific exercise equipment. Another special issue dealt with the Brattleboro military. Here's the SD Guard, Civil War companies, and even a picture of the shooting range in the basement of the armory, which many of us know is the place where you eat lunch at the senior center. And they are shooting down there. Other special issues dealt with the country club, the hospital, the library, and schools. They were a big deal. Here's before and after of Green Street. I've been told that some of these houses were moved to other parts of the neighborhood. Brattleboro was modernizing from one-room schoolhouses, and these schools were a sign of educational progress. By the end of the decade, we continue to see growth and plans for the future. Here's an August 1929 garden party and the new St. Michael's School. And in the October 1929 issue showing where the new skating rink next to the tennis court on Cedar Street will one day be built. But the Depression hits, and things begin to slow down. It isn't discussed much in With Interest, but there's no skating rink, no ski ball for the first time in 8 years, just an old photo. And we see the focus shift to the care of the neediest in these photos, the home for the aged, Holden Home, and a Christmas celebration for kids in the new Elks Lodge, formerly an Esty home. The final issue, April 1932, was a timeline compiled from the Annals of Brattleboro by Mary Cabot, a chronology of Brattleboro history from the 1600s to the early 1900s. There were no photos at all. And then With Interest goes away. Was it too expensive to produce? With Interest is really a unique and valuable bit of commercial journalism, filled with great photos and stories that capture an era. And we're really lucky to have it. It's originally intended as a marketing tool, but it rapidly evolved into a local magazine of history, news, people, and culture. And it's all online at ibrattleboro.com/braintrust. All of the covers and all the photos have been scanned in, and all the text has been painfully retyped by me. It's easy to search, and you'll also find copies of the Annals of Brattleboro there and a lot of other Brattleboro history. But that wasn't really the end of With Interest. In 1955, Charles Crane returned, and a special issue of With Interest was published one more time to celebrate the remodeling of the bank. And they listed a bunch of bank accomplishments, much like the early issues. Special paper and a color photo of Main Street added a special look and feel to this final chapter. Thank you, Charles Crane, and thanks for listening.
So Michelle and I were married in November of 1977, and the summer of '78, I was asked to co-lead a bicycling camping trip of Maui. And Michelle had some questions for me. She wanted to know, would the campgrounds have privacy? Because this would be our honeymoon after all. And I said, sure, no problem. And then she wanted to know what bicycling was like in Hawaii. Would it be dangerous? And I assured her it was no problem. Then she was curious about the Hawaiians. Would they be friendly to us? That was a ranger at one of the campgrounds that took a liking to me. And then she was curious about the camping. Would she be able to brush her teeth? And this is actually a cattle trough. And then she was curious about bathrooms. Would there be bathrooms at the campgrounds? Of course I said yes. And then she was wondering about showers. Would she be able to take a shower? Sure, I said. Then she was curious about how clean the campgrounds were. And I assured her that was no problem. And that's a cow out there. I don't know if you can see that. And our tent has some plastic sheeting there. Before the trip, she had asked me to wash the tent. And of course, I washed the waterproofing off. And we ran into a hurricane. Then she was curious, what about if I get thirsty? And then she wondered, well, we're camping. Do we have to, always eat at the campground? Can we ever go to a restaurant? And I said, sure. Little gourmet place here coming up. Then she asked, if we get tired of camping, could we stay in a hotel? And I said, sure, that's no problem. And we actually didn't stay there, but I did a year or two before. And I'd been camping for about 6 weeks. I got bed bugs in this place. Then she was wondering, do we always have to be on a bicycle? Of course not. And then she was wondering, do we always have to wear cycling clothes? And I said, no, you don't always have to wear cycling clothes. And then she wondered about the rain. Does it rain in Hawaii? And I had told her, it rains for a couple hours and then it's fine. But the year we went there, we actually ran into a hurricane. And our rain gear didn't work, so we ended up using garbage bags. Then she wondered, would there be places to go swimming? Of course. What was that, about a 30-foot jump? Then she was curious, would there be places to go shopping? I said, of course. The mall. And she was curious about the modesty. Were Hawaiians modest? Turns out they actually are. Then she wondered if Hawaii was romantic, and I said, oh yes, very. You've heard of doggy style, this is froggy style. Well, as you can imagine, Michelle was very, very happy. And so on the 30th of this month, we actually celebrate 33 years together. And ironically, she rode her bike today and I didn't.
Hi, I'm Jean Walsh, and I'm the reference librarian at Brooks Memorial Library here in Brattleboro. Many people call the public library the community's living room, and we have an open concept kind of living room where when you walk in the door, you pretty much see everything. But there are some hidden relics of Brattleboro history in this building. The library's fine arts collection includes artifacts like the first ballot box in Brattleboro and a broadside from 1776 in which Vermonters are addressed for the first time as residents of a free and independent state. Right there in our library. The library's local history collection includes many news clippings, thousands of them, like these, when we were asking some very familiar questions in the 1970s. And you might wonder why we don't just look these up online or on microfilm. And it's true that we have the Brattleboro Reformer and the Vermont Phoenix on microfilm back through the 19th century. But our little town has never had the resources to systematically digitize or index its papers. And so often, the clipping files are the only way to look up selected articles by subject. Also, the files have a lot of interesting primary source material besides news clippings. So here are some souvenirs of the Valley Fair, whose file spans an entire century from 1890 to 1995. These files were assembled by volunteers, Mary Lou Buchanan and Harriet Ives, who also made a card index that we used for many years. And then we realized it was time to put all this online so that more people could discover these historic resources. And we also wanted more detailed descriptions of the files. So for example, it's useful for a researcher to know that the miscellaneous schools file includes 23 items and that there are handwritten lists of students and some photos of the elementary schools. So in 2002, with help from the Freeman Foundation and the Thompson Trust and independent donors, the library contracted with librarian Dodie Godette to catalog the entire local history collection and the fine arts collection with its historic artifacts. Dodie used a format called MARC to encode her data. MARC stands for Machine Readable Cataloging, which is a term given by the Library of Congress that developed the first MARC record in 1966. And this happens to be the MARC record and the display record for the Annals of Brattleboro that Chris was talking about earlier. Most libraries share MARC records for efficiency, so when our staff cataloger, Leslie, adds new items to the collection, she obtains MARC records from the Library of Congress most of the time, and then edits those records to suit our local needs. But many local history items, like this one, are unique to our collection, and for these, Dodie had to create records from scratch. And as she did so, she relied heavily on the notes field of the MARC format to describe the items that she was cataloging, especially when the items were not books. Like this one, the Snow Angel is a marble copy of a sculpture made of snow by Larkin Mead on New Year's Eve, 1856, over where the courthouse is now. And we have it at the library, and like all fine arts items, its record includes a photograph. And just looking at some of the other little treasures that Dodie cataloged, this is a dance card with an adorable tiny pencil from that was sponsored by these military groups in the 19th century. And there's the SD Guard, those handsome guards again. And that's from the book Before Our Time by Harold Berry. These are documents related to the forced resignation of librarian Mary Pratt in 1917, the time of World War I. The trustees accused her of lacking patriotism and of introducing pro-German books into the library. Yeah. The Brattleboro Retreat files show the changes in the culture and in psychiatric care since the hospital was founded. And we're very lucky to have a couple issues of the Asylum Journal, which was written and published by residents of the retreat in the 1840s. There are files on businesses like these, and the middle photo is showing the location on Main Street of a restaurant run by Phoebe Bradshaw, who was an early African-American entrepreneur in our town, and the woman who brought ice cream to Brattleboro. Yeah. And this beautiful object was made by Library Bureau, the company founded by Melville Dewey, the great library patriarch. And its cataloging record, like all of our records, follows the basic format of the handwritten catalog cards from 19th century libraries. Someday we might have the resources to digitize all this stuff. In the meantime, we just heard of a statewide effort to digitize many historic newspapers in Vermont, and we hope to see results of that in the next couple of years. And locally, the Wyndham Foundation and, we hope, some other donors will enable Jess Whites from our staff to digitize and index the Porter Thayer collection, which is an amazing photographic record of life in this area in the early 20th century. And as things change, The reference desk will remain the place to turn when you have questions, when you want to look at anything in the local history collections. And we staff the desk from Monday through Saturday during regular daytime hours, and the special collections are available, accessible anytime the library is open. Thanks very much for listening.
Hi, I'm Doug France. I wanted to show a few pictures from around my yard. And I don't plan to talk too much during these images. I took this from the doorway in our house. I live in West Brattleboro, right next to the Bonnievale Environmental Education Center. And this is taken from the top of that hill. That's Round Mountain. My wife Laura and I climbed that for the first time. I've lived here since 1973, and on this farm. We went up there 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was great. That's looking south toward Guilford. I grow a lot of things at home, and so these are arranged in seasonal order, more or less. I'm what you might call technologically challenged. So when I took my 35mm slides down to Walgreens, the nice young woman down there put 3 or 4 or 5 of the images in the wrong way, and so the verticals turned out to be chopped on the sides and chopped at the top and bottom. This one and the last one are 2 examples of that. polarizing filters are a wonderful little device. That maple tree is just above our house, so we can see it as we go outside. That elm tree we had to cut down about 3 or 4 years ago. That was a nice tree.
And that concludes our first Brattleboro Pecha Kucha night. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. I'm sure we'll do another one in a few months' time. Look out for it in your local journal of interest. And we hope to see you then. Tell your friends about it, your experience about it. And you don't have to leave right away, though we will kick you out eventually. Feel free to come around, socialize, talk to the presenters about what you've just seen. Thank you very much. Good evening.